Firearms friends, let's talk about combat shotguns, or trench guns as they're colloquially known, but of course the use of shotguns in combat goes back hundreds of years. Not even the earliest instance, but think about when ships are made of wood and you're repelling boarding parties with your blunderbuss. And of course it's been in every American conflict. George Washington tells his troops to load with buck and ball. And of course, you don't have standard issue rifles or muskets at that time, so a lot of times fowling pieces, like whatever people had in their homes, were being pressed into service. You see shotguns at the Alamo. You see shotguns in the Civil War, Frontier, the Indian Wars, the Philippines, and then, of course, eventually the Great War that we all associate with trench guns. Now, in today's video, we're not going to look at the whole history of shotguns in combat. We're not going to look at the whole history of trench guns in World War I or subsequent conflicts up through Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, but we have a tremendous selection in our May 2nd through 4th premier firearms auction. Everybody likes trench shotguns. I knew you'd want to see them in a video, and there are some rarities in the sale. So if you are a US military collector, if you're a combat shotgun collector, pay attention. The selection is outstanding. Now, I wanted to present these to you in order of most issued to most rare. But I already ran into problems with that, and that's because the production numbers of combat shotguns are extremely hard to nail down, with a few notable exceptions, and we'll go over those in the video. And it's from a myriad of problems. One, it's kind of like old Colts and records there, or Winchester records. Nobody's keeping these records with collectors in mind, 100 years later. A lot of times you're in the full throes of wartime production, and a lot of those finer details get lost. So you have things like where you might be able to find how much a government purchased or contracted, but maybe not how many were actually delivered. You might be able to find even a delivery number on a certain date, but they're not broken down into, well, how many were trench guns, how many were riot shotguns in that configuration, and then how many were left with a long barrel for machine gun training or aerial gunner training. A lot of times, sometimes they will list those things, but they'll use the terms interchangeably, or whoever was keeping those records gets those mixed up. And those are just the government-related issues. Then you have issues also on the manufacturer side. Winchester, for example, is not producing these shotguns in serial number order. They're just cranking out barrels, cranking out receivers, and whenever they kind of get assembled is another matter. They're not even dedicating a serial number range. Like we're gonna, 1,000 to 10,000 are gonna be Model 12 combat shotguns or trench shotguns. Like those don't exist either. So it's really, and then you have, of course, the differences between World War I and World War II production, like our 1897 up here. There's differences, but it's not like the 1911, where they get a different model designations. You have two separate production numbers, and arguably for collectors, two different models to collect. So all sorts of issues with nailing down hard numbers, again, with few exceptions, but all that excitement aside, let's just get into some of the trench shotguns. And let's start off with our nice, reliable Winchester Model 1897. Of course, John Moses Browning designed an update of his 1893. This is for smokeless powder. This is the one that probably everyone recognizes. Boy, what a mean look. Like, what a way to set the table with the heat shield, with this like internals, like just right here out of the port. A hammer gun, 5+1 capacity, of course, famously able to be slam fired. Now, as we kind of mentioned earlier, the 1897 does have different versions from World War I and World War II. The World War I is solid frame, and it does have 6 holes in the heat shield up here. World War II gets a takedown model, and it has 4 holes, as you see here. If you kind of go around the circumference of the heat shield, that's what they're measuring. So this is a World War II example, making it much more rare. The 1897 is the trench gun of the Great War, of World War I, where they're issued and produced in much higher numbers. To see them in World War II, a little more rare because Winchester was producing the Model 12 for that, and we'll get into that a little later. But while they're the trench gun of World War I, and we associate them with the Great War, and rightly so, like just an iconic, what a picture of a combat shotgun. Their use predates that. These are used in the Philippines against Moro tribesmen. That's part of usually the 1911 story, where the 38 pistols aren't enough, and so we're looking for 45 ACP, and they famously bring in 45 long Colt to help with some stopping power. But they also brought in some Winchester 1897 shotguns, and I'm guessing that they were more than up for the task. Of course, they're used in the punitive expedition into Mexico, then World War I, then World War II, into Korea even, and a few even into Vietnam, which I think you'll find from the videos where a lot of shotgun designs, I don't want to say go to die, but finish out a long and lengthy military career. What a fabulous, fabulous John Moses Browning shotgun. It's also worth mentioning that the model 1897, being the most used in World War I, is likely the shotgun that generated the famous complaint, the diplomatic complaint from Imperial Germany about shotguns not being, coded the rules of war, saying that they're meant to maim, which is always funny. I mean, it is a mean-looking shotgun, especially when you put essentially a sword on the end, a 1917 model bayonet. But it's just a funny complaint from a country using mustard gas and flamethrowers. So it just gives you an eye into maybe how effective Americans and doughboys were at using trench guns in the actual trenches. Now, we did already, of course, mention that the 1897 Winchester is going to be replaced by the Model 12. The Model 12, of course, in 1912, is early enough to be seen in World War I, which is why it's on the table with some other World War I trench guns. But Winchester isn't going to compete with itself, so it's mostly producing 1897s in World War I, although Model 12s are there, which is why it's on this table. So we go from a John Moses Browning design, an update of the 1893, to a T.C. Johnson design that's got some notable improvements. Most notably, there are much fewer openings of ingress for dirt and debris. You really just have one port here on the back side, whereas your 1897, as a hammer gun, you're bolt sliding out the back. You have ports here. You have a large opening on the bottom. The Winchester Model 12 is an improvement for that. Does see use in World War I, most famous in World War II, of course. That's where you really see production amped up. The improvements have been noted. 1897, while there is some still World War II production, mostly you're moving to the Model 12 for World War II. So even though you have a change of designers from Moses Browning to Johnson, they're both 5+1 capacity. Hammer and hammerless is probably the biggest, most significant change in the sort of trench gun evolution. Both are still slamfire compatible. You don't have that disconnector in there yet, so if you want to have some shotgun fun, both those models are still fully capable of it. You see a lot of use World War II. These also go beyond in Korea and Vietnam, and while the 1897 you do see use against the Moro tribesmen and needing stopping power, the Model 12 serves that as well. A lot of use by the Marine Corps in the Pacific Theater. So while these are stopping Moro tribesmen, these are stopping Banzai Charge. These are also stopping later the human wave attacks that you see in Korea. So the Model 12, the 97, it seems regardless of the shotgun, when you need stopping power, the US military knows what type of gun they want to call on. The gun closest to me, I would normally say is the rarest gun in the video, but there's one gun that's coming later on, so stay tuned, that doesn't allow me to say this, but a Remington Model 10A is an extremely rare, almost impossible to find trench gun. It's fantastic. I think I can count them on one hand, the ones I've seen come through in the last decade. Again, we have something from the world of sporting arms, like the two we've already discussed. The Remington Model 10 starts life as a sporting arm. This is actually a Pedersen design. So again, Pedersen with his hands in military firearms design. The 10A, of course, comes into its trench shotgun configuration, which we haven't really defined or mentioned, but most books on the subject, you have trench guns, riot guns, standard sporting arms, even the long barrel training that we kind of mentioned earlier. A trench gun is going to consist of three things. You have generally a shortened barrel, some sort of heat shield on there to protect users during prolonged periods and not burning their hands on those barrels, and a bayonet mount. So here we have the 10A with all three of these. You'll notice the distinct wooden heat shield on top. There's a lot of speculated reasons why that might have been, such as Winchester's patent on their own heat shield, and they just didn't bother dealing with it. They just went to wood. That's one idea, and I think there's something to that. What a beautiful, beautiful, rare shotgun. A slightly longer barrel, so we have 20 inches on the other two. This one's 23, and you notice that when you're handling it. It's also a 5+1 capacity, but the Pedersen design even has a leg up on the 1897 and the Model 12s from Winchester, where now we don't have a loading gate on either side, and our safety is front here in the trigger guard. So really, kind of an ambidextrous design of Pedersen. No surprise there, one of the great firearms designers. And they are, as we mentioned, one of the rarest designs. Now I know I already went on about, well, how do you know what's rare if you don't know production numbers? Well, there's one contract that's found for these, and it's a contract for 3,500. And of course, after World War I, they serve in occupation Germany, and they're pressed into service elsewhere as riot guns. So you see like law enforcement or military bases, and then a lot are just plain old destroyed. So of those 3,500, very, very few surviving. They are an absolute, almost impossible to find trench shotgun. To have one in the sale is a fantastic opportunity. Now we'll dive into some trench guns from World War II and beyond. Of course, trench warfare is long gone, so they truly are combat shotguns, but still in that trench gun configuration that we all know and love. Now, I will say that we're going to start with one that's a little lesser known, but shouldn't be. And of course, just in that, it exemplifies trench guns and combat shotguns as a whole. There's a lot more than just those in World War I and World War II. There's a lot more than just, Winchester and Remington. There are a number of manufacturers that are being made in various configurations for a number of conflicts. And that's just what makes them such a great collectible genre besides the big dogs that we're showing you today. I'm talking today though about a Stevens 520-30, one that should absolutely be known, and probably is if you're already a World War II collector. Its production numbers are right up there with the Model 12. It's one of the most produced combat shotguns in World War II, even though its patent dates back to 1904. And this is another John Moses Browning design. With that patent in 1904, it was available in time for the Great War, but just wasn't developed enough in time to enter production. Now, there were a couple of Model 520s that were produced as prototypes. There's said to be one government contract that were for the Great War, and we can confirm that. We do know there were 520s developed as trench shotguns because we've sold one. But the 520-30 comes after a couple changes in ownership. Savage actually buys Stevens, because it's a Stevens 520-30. Some people call them the Savage Stevens. It's because Savage buys them in 1920. Stops production on the 520 though around, I believe, 1932, which would make sense during the Depression. But Savage holds on to all that machinery. It doesn't really go anywhere. So when World War II rolls around and it's time to look around for production and we need shotguns, well, Savage and Stevens are there to help fit the bill, and boy, did they ever. Those production numbers are substantial. We don't know of which variety, but there's about 35,000 that are purchased by the US government in all those configurations. Remember, that's trench shotguns, riot guns, and the trainers. The next gun on the table, actually the replacement for the Stevens 520-30, is the Stevens 620A. Started life as the 620. You'll sometimes see those markings not interchangeably used, but as production for one was kind of pulled into the other. You see that a lot with commercial parts being used just to amp up production of military guns. It's another reason why sometimes those production numbers are so hard to nail down for trench guns. But the 620 is an updated version, as you can see, basically identical guns. And I know that if you're a Stevens collector, I don't mean to offend, but the biggest change, of course, is the removal of this large sort of almost A5 humpback, if you will, into a nice smooth receiver for the 620. Didn't see the production numbers that the 520-30 did. Some sources say a third to about 12,000, which would be about half of the production of the 520-30, but both fabulous condition, both really, really good looking guns. We have switched from a thumb safety on this to a safety in the trigger guard, blued guns, walnut, sling swivels, all the classics you'd want out of those Stevens from that era. And next on the table is my favorite gun of the whole video and the rarest gun of the whole video, and that is an Ithaca Model 37. Now, you may be familiar with them as hunting rounds, and it's because it's Ithaca's first repeater is their Model 37 lightweight. Ithaca, of course, making American doubles in the early 20th century, but American doubles they're hurting for business, for lack of a better word. You do have all these great repeating shotguns of the early 20th century, some of which we've already talked about that have come from the sporting realm and taken Ithaca's business. So by then they're noticing, the patents on that Remington 17 aren't quite so active anymore. So they develop a gun that basically had started life as a Remington 17. That's another John Moses Browning design, by the way. And they improve it. They make it a little lighter for wing shooting, because that's what Ithaca does. You're making high-end shotguns for wing shooting. And of course, as the call to war arises in late 1941, early 1942, and the U.S. needs shotguns, Ithaca offers their services. Now, of those purchased for World War II on contract, this is the exception, right? This is the one we know the numbers on. There are 1,422 that are made for World War II contracts. They are the rarest World War II shotgun. And that's for an interesting reason. Much like the Singer pistol in all its, holy grail status and in all its collectability and tremendous value, where it only made 500 before being, Singer was kind of told that, hey, we need your attentions paid elsewhere. Ithaca's in a similar boat. Instead of making, Norden bomb sights and precision tools, they said, well, we don't need you to make shotguns. We have a lot of people doing that right now. Why don't you continue just making the 1911 A1s? And so that's why you see Ithaca produce 1911 A1s in World War II and not hardly any of the shotguns. Again, tremendously rare. They do rear their head again in Vietnam for contracts. There are some ordered, different finish entirely. And speaking of finish, when you look at this Ithaca 37, does it not stand out on this table? I mean, these are beautiful trench guns. The Stevens are beautiful. But the Ithaca, you can tell they were making high-end shotguns. Look at the bluing on there. Look at this beautiful figured wood and how rich that color is. So not only rare, but incredibly beautiful. What a piece to have in any American military collection. Last but not least, one of those designs that you don't always think of as a combat shotgun, but there it is, the Winchester Model 1200. Of course, that's an update for the Model 12. It's introduced in 1964, which is just in time to see some combat use in Vietnam. As replacement for the Model 12, you're getting rid of some of those steel components, and you have an anodized aluminum on there, which is cheaper, which made people kind of not like the 1200 as much compared to their old good Model 12s, but lended itself extremely well for jungle combat in Vietnam because it's so rust and corrosion resistant. Another change from trench shotguns is that it is not slam fire capable. It does have a disconnect because they were keeping those parts interchangeable or just making as few as possible for the 1200, the 1300, some of their semi-automatic designs. And so this one does have a disconnect. It is not slam fireable. It's a 4+1 capacity. And as you can see, it has a parkerized finish to go over that aluminum. So sort of a change from all the blued finishes we've seen come through the Great War and World War II. Fun fact about the Winchester 1200, because it's procured so late in 1964, but it actually uses the same sort of W-style bayonet lug that uses for the 1917 bayonet. Now, Bruce Canfield in his book supposes that's mostly bureaucracy based, that nobody bothered to approve a new bayonet lug, and so they just continued using the same one that used for the model 1917, which I secretly love. You're not using a lug for the M6 that you would have found on the M14 or the M7 bayonet on the M16. You still have this giant, essentially a small sword, a 1917 bayonet for the end of the Winchester Model 1200. Of course, the only problem with that is, there's not a whole lot of 1917 model bayonets in stock at the beginning of the Vietnam War, but you had the bayonet lugs, and so they were forced to make more of the bayonets. Yay, government bureaucracy, but the fact that those still get those giant bayonets is a fantastic perk to owning a Winchester Model 1200. Now, few of these have escaped government inventory, like a lot of Vietnam-era weapons. Like, you don't see the tons of surplus that's made available to the public after the conflict. So when you see a 1200, obviously always a good chance to pick that up. But because so many stayed in government inventory, some of these saw combat in Afghanistan and Iraq. They're being cleaned up. Of course, there's not many parts available, which famously caused a problem. When people had these Model 1200 in their units, there was actually a cartoon issued that, hey, if you have a 1200 in your unit, make sure you trade it in for like a new Mossberg. And I love thinking of that as well. If you were joining and you're in Afghanistan or Iraq and you're expecting maybe a Mossberg, 500 or a 590 or a new Benelli, and you're given a Winchester 1200 with a bayonet lug on it. Just goes to show you can't keep a good shotgun design down. And boy, haven't all these designs been proof of it? Whether they've been started life as a sporting arm, and most have, or they've seen combat, these great designs have proven themselves in battlefield and the hunting field. What a selection we have in our May 2nd through 4th Premier Firearms Auction. Keep an eye out for when that catalog pops online to our website. You're ready to place some bids. These are fantastic shotguns. And until next time, keep your powder dry.